TV18.
Hello, welcome to Newscentre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The Reserve Bank has barred Mahindra Finance from employing the services of third-party agents for any recovery or repossession till further orders. The clampdown comes after a tragic incident in Hazaribagh, where a 27-year-old pregnant woman was allegedly crushed to death under the wheels of a vehicle being driven by a Mahindra Finance recovery agent. The incident has turned the spotlight on the behavior of recovery agents as well. To discuss this further, I'm now joined by DK Mittal, former Financial Services Secretary, and TT Srinivasaraghavan, former MD of Mahindra Finance. Mr. Mittal, what do you think would the impact this move would have on third-party recovery?
Well, the incident is unfortunate, but such accidents can happen in any process. I'm confident Mahindra Finance would have a detailed process and detailed guidelines for the third-party recovery agents because RBI has issued detailed guidelines on the subject. That being so, I think the basic issue is there a culture to repay? And are there any modes available to execute recovery proceedings? If we were to take secured assets, so DRTs have about 20 lakh crore of cases pending with them, which are, cases could be running into lakhs, but the total amount involved is 20 lakh crores. And I have this information through the RTI. Now, if there's an unsecured loan, there is no process. Going to civil court does not work anything. So what is the method? So the basic issue before RBI would be to debate whether the process for recovery need to be streamlined. And if there is no process to streamline, unfortunately, such events will keep on happening. Nothing can be avoided because if borrowers are not interested to pay and they're ready to take loans and not interested to pay, then what do you do? Ultimately, financial institutions are having fiduciary responsibility to the money which they have received either from banks or either from public. So I think the basic issue, this issue focuses on that process which need to improve to see that such incidents do not occur. But one-off accident will always happen. Nobody can stop it.
Right. Mr. Srinivasaraghavan, when it comes to vehicle financing and recovery through third-party agents, what are the checks and balances that are in place? What are some of the supervisory norms that must be in effect when there are third-party agents working for a company?
Let me first, Parikshit, begin by saying that it's extremely unfortunate and distressing that something like this happened. It is, extremely tragic. Now, looking at the larger question which you asked, in terms of checks and balances, in terms of regulatory circulars and things like that, there is enough and more in place. There's a very well enunciated system in terms of practices to be followed, in terms of recovery, in terms of repossession, and most NBFCs, if not all of them, have very detailed contracts which they sign with these recovery agents, where clearly they spell out what can and cannot be done. So in terms of what's there, in terms of the framework, I don't believe there's a lot more that needs to be done. However, I think we need to, of course, it's difficult to do given that the atmosphere is very charged right now, but we have to step back a little and look at a slightly wider and holistic picture. If you look at the remedies that are available to lenders in general, but NBFCs in particular, increasingly, there's been more and more fetters on NBFCs being able to recover their loans. On SARFACI, for example, it's still not fully available to NBFCs. On arbitration, the Supreme Court has recently held that old arbitration clauses are no longer valid. They've made that a little more complicated. So if you look at the avenues open to lenders to recover their dues in a rightful manner, they have been fettered more and more, right? That does not therefore mean that, you can employ means which are not within the four corners of the law. That is nobody's case. But I think in order for such incidents to be prevented, I think the system as a whole, both the legal system and the regulatory system, needs to look at ways where lenders have better recourse to their primary security. Because bear in mind, in asset financing, primarily what the lenders rely on is the asset. So if there is a default, if there is a continuing default, the only remedy open to them is to take back their asset, try and dispose it off, and recover what they can. So this is what has been done for decades by NBFCs particularly. And of course, all prudence needs to be followed by them. All the necessary precautions need to be taken. And this is not really about third party or an employee. I mean, the same accident could have happened if it was an employee of the company doing this, for example. Because I don't know the facts of this case because I only know what's been reported in the media, but I have every reason to believe that this was an accident. This was not a deliberate act by this repossession agent. And while, as I said, the incident itself is terribly distressing and terribly unfortunate, I don't think we can narrow it down to recovery agents. I think it's about the whole system of recovery that is available to lenders in general, NBFCs in particular.
All right. Mr. Srinivasaraghavan, do you also feel that the RBI should be careful so as to not impact the ability of companies like Mahindra Finance, other NBFCs to recover loans, also to repossess vehicles?
Absolutely, yes, because the right to repossess is enshrined in the agreement which the lender and borrower sign. It is an inherent right which the lender has. Of course, due process has to be followed, notices to be served. That is all clearly spelled out, clearly enunciated. But once due process has been followed, the right to repossession is something that is inherent in every lender's agreement. And so it should be. Because as I said, what is the other fallback that they have?
Right.
So absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Their right to repossess should remain.
All right. So right to repossess must remain. Of course, the RBI has also told Mahindra Finance that you can go ahead and repossess vehicles, but through your own agents, not through third-party agents. Mr. Mittal, coming back to you, are there any measures that can be put into place in order to make sure that such accidents don't happen in future? There are some checks and balances in place, but at the same time, the ability to repossess is not impacted?
So we do not have detailed information of the facts of the case, whether there was an altercation, whether the recovery team was attacked by somebody. We have no idea on that. This unfortunate event it led to the death of a person, which is unfortunate. But, as I said, any such accident could happen in any process. And, if recovery agencies are not permitted, it will be very difficult for any FI, any financial institution to do lending. That's a very standard process. So what need to be done is to ensure that the person who are involved, they are debarred to participate in any process of recovery in any financial institution. So they are punished heavily. And the banks and the agency which are doing it should be penalized to pay damages to the person whose family member had died.
Mr. Srinivasaraghavan, why do, if we want to explain it to our viewers across the country, why do NBFCs employ third-party agents when it comes to repossessing vehicles?
Well, it's simply a question of practical reality, right? Because repossessing vehicles is not the primary business of an NBFC. The primary business of an NBFC is to extend credit and hopefully recover all of the money which they lend. It's only in a small percentage of cases where things go out of hand, where repossession becomes necessary, and there is a specialized group of people now who are these recovery agents who are able to do this far more efficiently and at scale, right? So it's logical, just like so many other things today are outsourced, not only by financial institutions, but by all manner of institutions. This is something that is not necessarily a core competence of the NBFCs. And if there are people who do it better and who do it more efficiently, that's the way to go. And given the volumes of business that NBFCs and banks write today, this is the only practical and realistic way to achieve this.
Right. So finally, Mr. Srinivasaraghavan, and I'll put this to Mr. Mittal as well. Now, when RBI is looking at this entire case, there is a police investigation going on as well. What is the best way forward in order to regulate the sector, but at the same time, do not impact the ability to take back vehicles for which loans have not been paid back on time and dues have not been cleared?
Listen, I think there's no easy answers to this, but a blanket ban is not necessarily going to help, because you also have to look at the other side. Ultimately, banks and NBFCs are in business not with their own money. I mean, they are accountable to their depositors, to their lenders, and therefore safety of their assets, safety of their capital is also equally important. I would argue that in this case, if the individual concerned has breached the law in whatever manner, then deal with that individual. If criminal proceedings are warranted, then certainly use those. But I think, to me, to put fetters on Mahindra Finance or on the sector as a whole is certainly excessive. One individual has stepped out of line. Let him be dealt with as applicable under the law. Let this be a message to others that you cannot violate the law, that you have to live within the letter and spirit of the law. Right. But to say that we will ban this practice altogether, to me, is actually counterproductive, because in a few months' time, you're going to find this showing up as higher delinquencies and higher NPAs on the balance sheets of NBFCs and banks.
All right, so strong words coming in from the former Secretary Financial Services and also TT Srinivasaraghavan, former MD of Sundaram Finance, saying that it would be counterproductive to put a ban on repossession through third-party agents because you will see higher NPAs in the months to come. We're heading into a short break, but don't go anywhere. The government has issued draft norms to make rear seatbelt alarm mandatory for car companies. But is the industry ready to walk the talk? We also speak to former Road Transport Secretary Vijay Chibbar and Vikram Kirloskar of Toyota Kirloskar Motor. Don't go anywhere.